Hello and welcome back once again to the Hustlamanticha. You see, from the beginning of this particular channel, we have dedicated most of our time to the discussions of certain important aspects and content within the study of history as a course and as a subject. Now, last week or in the previous video that we posted, it was about the evolution of mankind and how mankind evolved from the Paleolithic age into the Neolithic age. So we realized that it was very crucial for mankind to settle in one place as the Neolithic revolution was on the move, as the Neolithic revolution came to be with mankind. You see, by 10,000 years before the birth of Christ, these particular developments were still occurring. And if we strive to understand the evolution of mankind itself in a very nice and better way as learners of history, one aspect that we must take note is the economic development that occurred within the life of mankind within this particular period that I am talking about. This period, 10,000 years before the birth of Christ. You see, the ancient Egyptian civilization is estimated to have been on its peak of development by 3,100 BC. Now, but before this particular period, let's count the years back from 3,000 BC. Let's count the years back 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, up to 10,000 years before the birth of Christ. How was the societies of mankind that was emerging like? Have you ever think of how mankind even decided to relate with certain animals within their immediate environment? Have you sometimes sit down to imagine how mankind found out that the cotton plant is a source of fiber that mankind can utilize in the making of cloth? So all these particular developments emerged within this particular time frame that I am giving you. So you see, the United States Bureau of Census, the United States Census Bureau in 2012 gave a certain estimated number of people that were living on this particular planet 10,000 years ago. And from that estimation, it stated that it was between 1 million and 5 million people that were living on this particular planet, which is not even equivalent to third to fifth of the population of Nigeria in West Africa in current times. So you see, it was a very small group of people scattered along the surface of this particular earth, trying new things, trying to adjust into this particular environment. So this is the history that we are talking about. How mankind's life started. Between this particular period, one important development that occurred within the life of mankind was domestication of plants and animals. In fact, we would take our discussion from Africa, where the evolution itself started. By 10,000 years before the birth of Christ, mankind started moving from Africa to other continents like the American continent. So within the 10,000 years period before the birth of Christ that we are talking about, there were certain societies that were springing up in the west, in the northwestern part of America. We will also consider certain societies that were springing up in Ecuador, certain societies that were also springing up in the Middle East. You see, mankind by this particular time had moved across the surface of the earth and trying to adapt into the immediate environment and to also solve the challenges that this environment were posing for mankind. So even in Australia, some of these particular societies were emerging. So let's talk about a few crops that mankind was domesticating within this particular period. By that period, the crop that mankind, the earliest crop that mankind was able to domesticate was the maize or the corn, which we all have an idea of what maize is, a certain crop called wheat, and barley. According to archaeological discoveries, they realized that these particular crops were very early in their domesticating processes. So evidence of crop production came from a certain society in Africa, northern part of Africa, in Egypt, a certain society that was springing up called Fayum. So the native population that was springing up in the region of Egypt within a certain small society called Fayum were very much intelligent enough to have realized that it is important for them to domesticate these particular crops so that it will help them to adapt into their current situations. Now, aside these particular developments, we will also realize that certain animals were also domesticated across the world within these particular locations that I am talking about. Certain animals were like the oxen, certain animals were like the camel, certain animals were the cattle within the societies that were evolving. All these animals were domesticated, sometimes to help mankind in transporting certain goods from some locations to some other locations. You see, before the 19th century, where mankind started inventing mechanics like cars that could transport us from places to places with our goods, our main source of transportation as a people were dependent on the availability of certain animals like the horse and the camel. And that was how mankind was living his life. So within this particular period, one important thing that as learners of history we must always know is that mankind domesticated certain animals to help man adapt into certain challenges that the environment posed for them. Back in Fayum, where the evidence of crop production came from, you realize that historians also realized that they used certain animals to attach them to certain plows so that they could use them to turn over the land so that it will help them improve the nutritious nature of the land, to help them cultivate more or some more other crops within the region that they were living. So if you go back into northwestern parts of the American continent, the societies that were emerging as at that time, 10,000 years before the birth of Christ, these societies were somehow, they had not been able to successfully emerge into the sedentary lifestyles that some other societies like those of the Middle East, those in the African continent were living, but rather as a result of the abundance in food resources, they started to stockpile certain produce. And you see, in the previous discussion that I did, I said that as a result of the Neolithic Revolution, mankind was now producing surplus. Yes, it had an impact on the lives of mankind within this particular period that I'm talking about. As a result of that, it led to the development of complex political systems that exist even today. It is as a result of those developments that allow those particular developments to emerge. So at a point in time, because mankind was able to produce surplus food, there were some other people within the population that were emerging, who were also engaging themselves in other aspects of lives of the society. So people started becoming scribes. So back in the days, scribes were intelligent group of people who had the ability of writing, who had the ability of keeping certain important information of the society. Some other people like metallurgists, those that were into metal works, those other people who were into craftsmanship, those other people who were into shipbuilding and those stuffs. It was as a result of mankind's ability to domesticate certain plants and animals that aided mankind to fully evolve into such complex political systems. You see, as surplus food were being produced, there were obviously people that were going to oversee these particular surpluses. And as development was ongoing, these people decided to entrench themselves as kings and leaders of the societies that were emerging. And that is why, at a point in time, a certain man who was very brave within the ancient Egyptian civilization called Menes, or in some books they call him Pharaoh Nama, will then unite the two societies of ancient Egypt. And then that was the beginning of the ancient Egyptian civilization. So throughout this discussion, we have been able to realize that within that particular period, mankind attempted to domesticate certain plants and animals to help mankind adapt into their present situations. One, for transportation, for food, protein source. In fact, mankind used these particular domesticated plants and animals to warm himself, because there were certain animals from which mankind got leather from. All these particular leathers, some were used as cloth, some were used to prepare certain cloth that they would use to put around their waist, you see, those kind of dressing. And some other plants like the flax and the cotton, notable for the people in northwestern coast of America. They were using this plant in the manufacture of clothes. So you see, back in Egypt, back in the Middle East, the animal like the camel, all these animals were being domesticated to help mankind transport their goods. The cattle from which meat and milk could be obtained from. So you see, within that particular period, mankind had been able to fully establish some societies that mankind could use as the beginning of their development into complex civilizations that we will discuss in our next video. You see, so this was just a leftover discussion that we had to do to ensure that we understand fully the topic of the evolution of mankind. In next week, we will post a certain video on how agricultural activities were being undertaken within the societies that Pharaoh Nama brought together or united to form the ancient Egyptian civilization. So thank you very much for always being with us. This is the Hustlamanticha, and this is the Hustlaman TV.